Okay, just going to give this a little go. IFS, Internal Family Systems Therapy. What is it? It's something that come out of systemic thinking, systemic ideas, which way you want to think about that. Systemic practice. So systemic practice is the practice of family therapy. So Dick Schwartz was a family therapist. He says he's got a PhD in family therapy. He was a prolific writer, wrote loads of books for family therapy. I studied it, and for about over 6 years. And what led me to study it was the fact that I was studying person-centered counselling, and then I went on to study integrative counselling. But what caught me about Carl Rogers' work was that it was influenced by systemic ideas, and that really interested me. It just got me hooked, and I ended up going and studying systems thinking after I found Dick Schwartz's Red Book whilst studying Carl Rogers. So needless to say, I studied IFS whilst I was studying systemic practice. Gosh, what can I say about that? What's systemic practice? Loads of people have asked me over the years, what is systemic practice? People can't understand it. Most people on the course didn't understand it for years. It's quite a thing to get your head round. I wonder sometimes if I've got my head round it. It can be hugely intellectual. And there's so many approaches in systemic practice that it's a worldwide phenomenon. There's this country's approach, that country's approach, this person's approach, and there's just so many. But two things that come to mind with IFS of systemic ideas is other than the things that Dick Schwartz talks about, is the putting the strongest member of the family in the mirrored room, or asking them to step out into the observational room where other therapists would be observing what's going on with the therapists working with the family, and then hot wiring in on the phone to speak their observations. So in family therapy, we could ask a child who's finding it difficult in that setting to go in the observational room and just observe it from the observational position, or ask the most interruptive person to go and step out into that room with the other therapists to see, and they would get to hear what the other therapists are discussing. So it would give them more perspective, and they'd see how the family would change when they wasn't there, and what they would discuss without their presence. So it's a lot of introducing context. But the thing that stands out to me is a position of no position, or I forget the right word to it now. I was thinking this earlier. Position of no position. A position of not knowing. A position of not knowing. And so, the therapist takes a position of not knowing. They don't know what's going on in each participant who comes in. They invite. They choose to be curious. They don't know, so they have to be curious to find out. So they ask each participant in the family how they perceive what is going on, what's going on for them. So that would all be put out into the space between the participants. So they'd be creating or informing the space between, the open space, which the therapist would be in and feel that and have to take that neutral position, or not take a neutral position, depending on who that person is. And so when the therapist would go around each participant asking their perspective or their views, other participant would hear new news. So they'd be updated. So that mix of information that goes into the cauldron, so to speak, the space between the soup, is being updated. So then that would give them all something different to think about. So change is happening naturally. How can change not happen in that kind of environment? So, and the other thing is irreverence is a big thing in systemic family therapy. So, what is irreverence? Use of doubt, So in IFS, this is unblending. It's differentiation. It's choosing to differentiate from what is actually going on there, and being doubtful towards it, being very accepting, being curious and doubtful simultaneously. So it's really interested in the information of each participant, but it's not going to take it for absolute granted. And so there's the saying to favour or fear no individual participant. So to kind of remain neutral, and so all parts are welcome, all participants are welcome. You're treating them like they got something to say, you're curious, and you're just finding out what's going on. And it's very much similar to functional family therapy, which is one that I really liked when I was studying it. Functional family therapy, the most disturbing person in a family that takes their family to therapy because of this person. They're so disturbing. They're very curious about what that person is trying to achieve, what they're trying to do, and then it's like wow, the family didn't realise. They it's new news. It's like that person was just trying to help us, and it seems so like it was causing such a disturbance. So this is what I find really interesting with IFS, and I really like the fact that Dick Schwartz was someone who was a bit of a rebel. He shook the system that he was embedded in, and kind of. I can remember when I first read the Red Book, it was like, oh yeah, he must have listened to Carl Rogers. He was really listening humanistically to his clients, and and not that systemic thinking was ever intended not to be individual therapy. It always was. And I can remember they were teaching us how to do genograms, where you'd map out the family tree, or how each person is positioned in the family, not necessarily exactly like a family tree, but it's instead of the details of just who they were, it would be who they were emotionally, how other people perceived them emotionally, what people said about them emotionally. So you'd see how these patterns run through the family, and so and then we'd ask each person, how they see that family tree or the others, and so there'd be the internal view as well, like a genogram inside each participant. So it becomes very, very rich, a lot of information to pick. So we used to draw it all out, draw pictures, and I see all of this in IFS, and I can't think of any of my tutors or mentors that really didn't speak the language of IFS. It was all there. Maybe I was just seeing it that way because I got a bit hooked with IFS. I went into that course having read the IFS literature. But the mindfulness was there, the observational position was there. My tutors used to ask, where are you in this? Where are you? You've got all this going on inside you. Where are you? How are you in there with all this? So you got this going on, that going on, and some of these tutors weren't really interested in IFS. They didn't really know about it. I kind of introduced them to it, so that was fascinating. So IFS. Why did I get so hooked on it? What is it? It's a logical construct. This logical construct or steps towards your deeper nature. Gosh, that reminds me of Bateson, his book, and I can't think of the title right now. But this logical construct that hacks through the mind, and you kind of hack through the mind and go, oh my, there's this self, there I am. And so Hakumi, and so it's I can remember when I was studying CBT and mindfulness based CBT, I can remember putting on my wall and going ding dong, and I had all these therapies mapped out and how they all link together. And I can remember seeing the Noble Path in CBT, and Albert Ellis's work and Aaron Beck's work, but it was kind of a bit linear, unlike systemic thinking, which seeks wider into the field of understanding the wider context. It's a social model, systemic thinking, and but that's what this systemic logical approach is of IFS. It's almost like a systemic or a version of the Noble Path, and it incorporates the other, pretty much all the therapies that I've ever studied. It brings it all together so beautifully. Cause I can remember being in the 90s when I first moved out from home, and I was reading Carl Jung and doing active imagination and stuff, and realizing that I had this belief that was disturbing me, and kind of gathering it up in my mind and making it into a ball and throwing it over the horizon and watching it distance. And so there was no convincing me when I read that red book in the 1995 red book, Internal Family Systems, and there was another time as well that really spoke to me in my experience before I come along, found this book, this work, was I'd split up with a girlfriend in my early 20s, and I was in a real tough time, and I felt I could really hear the voices of shame, and I felt really harassed, and I can remember just realizing none of these are me. That's not what I'm about. That's not who I am. And literally, in not very nice words, telling them to get out of me. And they were the voices of teachers, of people heckling and bullying in school, and also my own thoughts of what they were. So these are ideas of in IFS of unburdening, and we got a protective part of us that wants to look after us in this way and look after our exiles, make sure we don't feel them, all makes sense. It's so lovely, to know that there's a way to hack through all of that to go to somewhere so beautiful. So yeah, IFS, multiplicity of the mind. There's many parts of us that do this. We've got a part of us that knows how to shape our nose, how to grow hair, all this kind of innate stuff, how to form legs, how to form our brain function, the reptilian mind and the more recent formed mind. Different parts. They're all different parts. My left eye is a different part to my right eye. My shoulder is not my knee, etc. We know our body comes with different parts, and we know we have anger, we know we have sadness, we know we feel different things, we know we think different things, we know, and we know we have a history of our soul, different people in us, and to work with that in that way, that we know that there's those 3 or 2 major influences or parts of our system. The exiles, the ones that have been bound up with unworthiness and shame, and they've kind of given up, and we've had to move on from them, leave them behind, desert them to survive. So these other parts of us come in to look after us, and to be with that, to make for that to come so clearly through this work, to be understood. It's just lovely, so freeing. To separate, I'm hearing the words of C. Sykes, saying unblending. So the manager parts, the fast parts of us that just want to rescue us quickly. Call them firefighters, or the emergency service. They come rushing in to solve the problem. So you don't have to feel that wounded one, because you've learned it's too difficult to feel, and you think that you can't ever feel it again. That part of you just crawls up and wants to hide away. To connect to that energy that part was disconnected from. Almost, that each parent can't be, or society can't be there for each part of us, each stage of our life. We have to somehow learn to be there for ourselves, and it's almost like those missing moments of trauma are meant to be. To learn to be there for yourself. And you get that chance to bring that self-energy. There's no perfect parent, there's no perfect society. You have to be there for yourself. There's missing attachment wounds, but somehow that energy keeps us moving, despite those missing moments of co-regulation. The co-regulation is one thing, but that deep energy of self-energy that you feel inside is more than you can feel from other people. It's your feelings. It's not other people's feelings. It's not secondary feelings. First-hand feelings. Your self-energy. Your self-presence. Yeah. Parents, school, those kind of holding structures are kind of like a launch pad, and that comes with a bit of punch in itself, and then we have to go back to that. I'm not sure how well I've explained this, but something beautiful about the way IFS lets people connect to their deepest nature, their deepest connections, then connect to a part of them, to see beyond the burdens and recognize the part beyond the walls of the castles that's built around them, and invite the part back to the doors and reconnect. To feel that connection, that reintegration, the acceptance. Wholeness. That's what systemic thinking is a shifts towards closer approximation. Closer approximation. Moving in the space between, unblending, inviting each participant, each part to talk, to update. Of course, if you do that externally, you're moving more into the institutional force, or the rhetoric, or the multiverse of the participants, well, that creates. And if you do it internally, you're heading towards self-energy, because you go beyond. Which is exactly what you do in mindfulness practice. If you go to a Dharma hall, this thought comes, that thought comes, and you observe it, and then it gets deeper and deeper, and emotional parts come, you can't ignore them, they're right in your face, and they're telling you their story, and they're sharing their feelings with you. You can't help but be curious, you've got no choice. They're right there. But then you step aside that, and then the next one comes, and it goes deeper and deeper and deeper until you meet self-energy, the deepest of self-energy. Very, very similar practice. Okay, I don't know how I've done with this, but I'm going to leave it there. Probably have a listen back and maybe put it out there or not. Go well, thank you.